Welcome to another CHRO Conversation from the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg. Today I'm joined by Nico Lamoureux, Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at IBM. Nico leads IBM's global people strategy, skills, employee experience, and HR services, guiding a team that supports more than 300,000 IBMers across 170 countries. We'll explore how HR builds trust in AI and prepares talent for what's next. Nico, as always, it is a tremendous treat to have you here on campus. Thank you for coming.
It's always great coming to South Carolina.
So, as one of the truly leading voices in AI, particularly from the CHRO role, but I think from all business perspectives, can you share where are we now in this space?
I think if I'm going to really answer that question, the answer is I'm not sure we know yet where we are now. I think the good news is that we're at a place where whether you're a CHRO or anywhere in the lines of business, they are all using AI in some capacity. I think the period that we are now in is we have moved past what I'll call experimentation. We don't really know what this does, and we are now into really big enterprise use cases. How can it transform TA? How does it transform customer support? And so I think that's what's happening now. And actually, the reason why I'm really excited about this change is because it's less about the technology as we go forward. That was what we were in experimentation mode with, and more about return on investment. In this business process, if we put in AI, what's the return? And I think that's a better place to be as big organizations.
So are there really big questions we should be asking in HR about AI now? Or is it the way you just described it? Like, where are we with talent acquisition? Where are we, et cetera?
I think there's a couple big questions we should be asking. So one is, if you're going to put AI in place, what is the return? Are you creating a better employee experience? Are you going to drive cost savings? Are you going to drive higher compliance or effectiveness? So you have to understand, what is that return? What is the business case? But I think there's a second question, and maybe you would tell me that you need to answer it even first, which is, just because AI can do it in your organization, should it? I think that in HR, where we're in this FOMO, following piece, where, hey, this company's doing this, it must be a best practice, let's put in AI just like them. And I think you need to ask yourself the question of, if I put AI in this business process and it has the return that I'm expecting, does it meet the culture of my company? Does it serve the business model? Does it serve the talent strategy? Those are pieces you have to answer as well, or else you're just kind of doing AI for the sake of doing AI, or you're going to do AI because it has a big return, but it might be in conflict with your talent strategy or your culture or even your business.
So you've talked about a couple of things there. Are there things that you would say that HR really must be using AI for now? Anything that's kind of almost table stakes for many or most organizations now?
It's less about must from a you must use it in this process or not. I think there are three use cases for HR that all organizations should think about when you think about AI. One is what we typically think about, questions and answers. That might be in the benefits domain if that's where your organization is getting the most questions. It could be in talent acquisition for new candidates. But think about questions and answers and what HR and talent processes that AI can use to do that question and answer piece. A second piece is transactions. So AI can do transactions for you. At IBM, we use it to transfer employees, change your address. You're not logging into systems, you're actually doing it through a chat interface. So are there transactions that maybe in your current systems, your employees and managers can't find? They forget how to do them. They forget how to log in. They get stuck in the process. Is there a way that AI, through a simple chat interface, can help them walk through those transactions? So transactions is another piece. And then the third piece is this new era of agentic AI. And this idea of, in your organizations, are there big processes that can be completely done in an automated way through AI? At IBM, we run a lot of our promotion cycles. So we use an AI agent to draft emails to 30,000 managers, kicking off the promotion cycle. It then gives them customized reports that says, Anthony, here's who's eligible in your team. These are not HR professionals parsing spreadsheets and sending this data around. It's all being done through the AI agent. Now, just so you don't get worried that I'm letting AI agents run wild, we still have HR business partners that are spending time making sure that what we're doing is the right thing. Have we promoted the right people? Are we coaching managers on how to tell somebody they're not getting promoted? So I think you've got to think about, in your organization, do you have these big programs and processes where your HR professionals spend a lot of time doing rote tasks, data consolidation, answering basic questions that instead should be done with an agent?
So those are three things you talked about that many organizations probably ought to be doing. Are there things that you'd point to now and say, maybe HR shouldn't be going down the AI path in these areas at this moment?
I would say no. And again, I think as long as it's fit for purpose for your company. The example that I always get is, one of the biggest use cases right now in the HR domain is using AI in talent acquisition. As advanced as IBM is in using AI in many domains, I'm kind of a late mover in talent acquisition. Why? Not because the technology isn't amazing, but for our talent strategy, we're a skills first talent strategy. I'm not convinced yet that the AI algorithms have worked themselves out to take people from non-traditional paths. And so until I see that yield, it's not the right place for us. But we do use it in compensation. And that's a place where many companies wouldn't even think of going. But for our company, our culture, our compensation programs, AI has been a great assist to help managers decide where to spend their budget, how to communicate compensation decisions. And so again, the reason why I'm hesitant to just say, no, never do it here is, one, I do think it depends on the company. I do think it depends on your practices. But also the technology is moving so fast that my team, as soon as I say, no, we're never going to do it there, they remind me to say, yet.
So in those places where you don't feel like you want to be all in at the moment, are those places to experiment in some ways? Or how do you approach it?
You could experiment. Another way to do it is just watch the technology evolve, test it. I think this is another place where, in the TA space, the reason why I want to be a little careful about just experimenting is because it is with real candidates that are applying. And so if the experiment proves that it doesn't work, you've affected and you've made decisions. And so for me, this is more about testing, back testing, running scenarios, and once it's evolved, then I'll put it in place.
It seems that there are a lot of people that get very nervous about the use of AI. When is it making a decision about my career or otherwise? How do you approach the importance of transparency about what the role is of AI or Gen AI?
Yeah, so for us, we are very clear that AI on talent items is never a decision maker. It can provide recommendations, it can assist with automation, it can give managers information, but we are very clear on talent decisions. It is never a decision maker. And that's really important for us to ensure that it's not running wild, that there's always a human in the loop. Now, could we get to a point where we're okay with AI being a decision maker? Maybe. But right now, we're very clear and transparent with our employees.
Can you just say what that means by being clear and transparent with them about about that part. How do you go about doing that?
So we talk to our employees very openly about the fact that AI is not a decision maker on talent items, that it's always your manager. But we are also clear with them where AI may be making recommendations to a manager. So in our compensation cycle, as an example, we have AI that when a manager opens up their annual salary budget, there's an AI recommendation of the best way to spend that salary budget. It can be based on market positioning, the skill that somebody has, their past performance. It takes into account all of that information and says, here's the optimal way to spend it. We explain that to employees. We talk about the factors that the AI takes into consideration. But whether a manager follows that information is really their discretion. And so that's an important part and just an example in the HR process of where we're clear where we're using it, we're clear what inputs are going into it, and then who the ultimate decision maker is.
So in many organizations, I really don't know where IBM is on this, comp and performance management are often totally separate fields. It's not something where is IBM in this?
From compensation performance management. So they are two distinct teams.
Okay.
But when it comes to how we deploy programs, they come together. And so this is a really important part of this, and also for us, learning and talent acquisition. Because for the AI to make recommendations about, hey, what an optimal salary increase is for you, it has to know your performance, the performance team. It has to know market positioning, which is not just benchmarking from the compensation team, it's also input from the talent acquisition team of, are these roles that even in the short term, forget the compensation surveys, that are growing in demand or shrinking in demand? And then we bring in the learning team because we take into account skills. So information like not only what skills do you currently have to do your job, but do you have skills that we see for you to do future jobs? So this cross-functional to deliver one program, where in many organizations you would think, well, isn't that just a compensation program? Has really been a huge unlock for us, but AI helps us take all of those inputs from the various teams and ensure we're deploying them consistently.
So is this something you see spreading over time, that AI is able to really bring these functions that are sometimes considered separate into one more cohesive group?
Absolutely, and not just at a programmatic level, but also at an individual level. And I think this is really important. So if you think about basic questions and answers, if a manager were to ask an AI agent a question to say, what's the sick time policy? The AI agent can come back with it, and the manager then might say, well, I need to put Nicole out on sick leave for 4 weeks. The AI agent can answer that question. But then the AI agent can say, do you need to cover Nicole for that 4-week time period? Is there somebody on your team you need to change to a different job code or hourly schedule? Do you need to hire a subcontractor? The AI can be prompting this, and usually in HR we would think, well, this is a sick time question. The benefits team should answer it. Why does it have anything to do now with a comp schedule change or even a talent acquisition, go get some supplemental help? But the AI can help piece this together and create a very different experience.
And then I imagine that's related to how we think about the HR model broadly. So you talked about how now AI is handling something like 12 million transactions a year that would have been human. So what does that do to our understanding of what an HR model ought to be?
And this is something that, again, you might call this an experiment, but something we've put in place. We have totally changed our HR model. As you say, we have a front end, an AI agent that answers questions, it does transactions, but it doesn't answer all questions or all transactions. And it's not because the AI couldn't do it, it's because we've made decisions that we don't want it to do it. So as an example, at IBM, because of our talent strategy, because of how we feel about our culture, if a manager says, I have a low performer into the AI agent, the AI doesn't even try to answer it. because we've trained the AI, that that is not something we want AI handling. So what happens is you have a low performer, the AI agent will say, we need to connect you with what we call a team HR partner. The AI agent then will say, when would you like to meet with your team HR partner? And you could say, today, 2 o'clock. It will send out a meeting invite to you. And at 2 o'clock today, you'll get on with a team HR partner who is not only an expert in performance management, but is also an expert in learning and skills. Because again, to your point of this cross-domain, sometimes when a manager has a low performer, they need to understand the process of how do you document that, how might you separate them. But sometimes they want an answer of, well, how do I make Nickel better? What are the learning and skill plans? All too often, we go into very quick silos. It's like we're a sorting machine, right? A question comes in and we go immediately to what we think the most likely process answer is. The thing that AI is unlocking for us is I can now build these teams that have much more domain expertise.
Speaking of teams, and you have described your vision of how teams ought to be, and I think you even came up with 4 different scenarios about it. But how do you see AI helping us build stronger, better teams?
This is where my thinking has also evolved on this. And I was someone who said, I'm not sure about AI in coaching. I'm not sure about, is that a uniquely human piece of this? But what I quickly realized is, well, I definitely believe in all organizations, human to human coaching is critical and will continue to be critical. One of the problems with that is it's not always on demand. And we need to get access to that to more people at broader scale. And so when I think about building teams, people think often about the macro. How should I build a team? What should my team look like? Really, the most effective teams are, I have a team scenario right now. I have an employee who doesn't seem to be engaging with the other employees. That type of coaching is something AI can ask questions about, prompt about. I have friction on my team. What are some mechanisms in my next staff meeting that I should use to address this? When we think about building stronger teams, it's not just, okay, I have a clean sheet of paper. How do I build a better team? It's, you have a bunch of teams that exist in your organization today. How do you get the right coaching, not just to managers, but to team members? You and I are peers. This doesn't seem to be working. Anthony has a totally different communication style than I do, but we've got to come together. How should I approach it? That type of coaching is pretty invaluable, and that's what I call this micro building of teams that I think AI can do at scale.
And can AI then also do that for leadership? Is that how we're thinking about training leaders going forward?
Of course. And just to be clear, this doesn't mean that I think that traditional leadership has totally fallen by the wayside. This isn't me saying that leadership development doesn't need to be human anymore. But this idea of supplemental, truly augmenting what we might traditionally do in leadership development, I think is really powerful. Because I think all too often leadership development can be episodic.
And I've heard you a few times now talk about the way we ought to be using AI as to help push back on our thinking. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I talked about this idea of you've got agentic AI that can do these automated processes. But in most of our organizations, we're going to have this tool that's generative AI, that's questions and answers, getting us information. And all too often, I think we don't use it enough. And what I mean by that is we use it for just a first order question. Well, what about the second order question and the third order question? I'm thinking about talking to my manager about how to get a promotion. How should I approach that? The AI will tell you. What if my manager tells me I'm not ready? Start asking other questions. What if they say I don't have the right skills? What are some things I could offer up? Those types of first order, second order, refine my thinking. It might even cause me to say, oh, maybe I shouldn't be asking them about a promotion. Maybe I should be asking about a different learning assignment. That is where I think there's this power in generative AI, and oftentimes we just ask it the first question and not the really important follow-on questions.
So that's a way we should all be using AI a little bit better. You've also talked about how you see AI not so much eliminating jobs as changing all jobs, including your role as CHRO. How has AI changed your role as a CHRO?
So a couple ways. One, probably pretty obvious. It has removed administrative tasks. Things that I used to have to go into systems to approve are now happening either automatically or one click. The second way is I used to get a ton of information, different reports. I'd have to triangulate. I can now use AI to pull information from a lot of different places, give me summaries in an analytics way that's not just me looking at this dashboard, then that dashboard. So that's a second way. And then a third way is this point on coaching. I use it not only for just how I might approach a conversation, but also to refine my communication. You know, not just write me an email that says this, make it clearer, put in data. I think I'm too long-winded. What does Anthony really need to know? I think this idea of kind of refining how we transmit information is also a really important part of it.
And here, of course, at CES, we think about succession planning, and that leads us to the role of the CHRO in interacting with the board. Yeah. We often hear new CHROs say they're not sure how to approach get that trust from the board. How has your relationship and your role in interacting with the board changed over the 5 years you've been CHRO?
So the first thing I would say to new CHROs is cut yourself a little bit of slack initially. I know everybody wants to jump right in and think that those relationships just exist from the beginning, particularly if you've gotten to the CHRO suite. You're probably pretty ambitious, pretty high performing. But just like any relationship, that trust has to build over time. How does that trust build? It builds with domain expertise. Show up in the board meetings, in the interactions that you have. It might be committee meetings. I understand it may be on a limited basis, but every one of those interactions, the board wants to see your level of domain expertise, and it's one of the best ways that you can ensure that you're building that trust with the board. The second thing is, remember that the domain expertise is them assessing of, can you do your job? But they also want to know that you're an independent advisor. So you will find yourself in a moment, it might be in a board or committee meeting, it might be in a hallway conversation, when you are asked a very direct, pointed question from a board member. How do you think this leader's doing? Do you think the compensation structure is going to really motivate? Make sure that you know the answer to that question, where you can demonstrate an independent point of view that's really important to board members. Yes, as CHRO, you serve your CEO, the leadership team, you have a management responsibility, but you also have a relationship to that board, an independence that's pretty important.
How do you balance what seems like an impossible task? You work for the CEO, you have a strong relationship with that CEO, but as you just said, you also have a responsibility to the broader organization and then the board as that representative. How do you balance that?
So context does matter a little bit, as I know you know, Anthony. So if you're in a situation where there's really, and I would say this is an extreme situation, right? Where maybe the management team, the CEO is really doing things they shouldn't be doing. That's a very extreme, it is very clear. Most of us, though, live in a different world, right? And so how you balance that, and how I've been very clear, is set guardrails early with your CEO. Make sure they understand you have this dual responsibility. Be transparent about it. I'm not going to the board behind your back, just know I'm going to be meeting with the board on, this many times a year. And understand that there are those guardrails. I also am very clear that there's nothing I would tell the board about how a CEO or management member is doing coaching that I haven't told them first. And that's really important to me, that I never want to tell the board something that any of the management team, the CEO in particular, would feel blindsided by. And that's also a tricky thing to do at times, but really important.
But it also means you need to be really proactive about having those conversations with your CEO or other senior leaders before a board member asks you that kind of question.
Absolutely. And where I've seen CHROs get in trouble, and maybe even in the early days I felt a little out of sync, was when this happened. When a board member asked me a question, I needed to give an honest answer. But if I was honest with myself, it would have been new information to one of the management team members. And so this idea of being very proactive in your day job about that feedback, about that coaching, is really important.
So let me just finish with this one about whether it's you think about it in your own role or maybe even better, thinking out broadly. When you think about really successful CHROs, what does that look like to you? What is a successful CHRO?
The first thing is they are moving the business forward. And I'm very clear on this. We don't do HR for the sake of HR. We do HR to move the business forward. And sometimes that means executing flawlessly on a talent strategy. Sometimes it means building great leaders. Sometimes it means coaching. Sometimes it means really being that independent advisor to the board. But you are moving the business forward. That is the first and foremost thing I would say about being a great CHRO. The second thing about being a great CHRO is that you're fit for purpose. You're fit for the context that you're in. The really great CHROs know the business environment that they're in, know the talent strategy. If they were running their own companies, there might be ideal ways they would love to run HR or plays they'd like to call in talent. But the best CHROs say, I know what I think best practices are, but what are the practices that are needed for this company and this time?
As always, a tremendous treat for us to have you down here, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining this CHRO conversation with IBM's Nicole Lamoureux. Today we unpacked how to embed trust and transparency in ethical AI, when to use AI and Gen AI in HR programs, and the capabilities HR professionals need now and for the future of work. On behalf of the University of South Carolina's Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession, thank you for watching.